to another episode of All Things Ghostly. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you haven't. My name is Abbie. Nice to meet you. Today we have a very spooky episode because we are on the topic of Ouija boards. Now, my opinion on Ouija boards is definitely very strongly stay away from them. I don't want them. I think that it's a little bit different than contacting ghosts in other ways, just because with Ouija boards you don't get to pick the ghost that you're kind of communicating with. Not that you do with something like an EMF reader or something like that, but with Ouija boards it's a portal opening, like a portal of communication that you're opening to who knows what. So it's a little bit different because you're the entity is controlling your body as well by making it like push, if that makes sense. So I think that that's where I just draw the line, because versus just again talking to it through something like an EMF, the entity is actually allowed to make your hands move the way that it wants it to spell out something. So I personally do not like them, but I know that there are great paranormal stories when using them. So today we are going to read some Reddit stories of people's Ouija board experiences and what has happened to them. I'm very excited for these stories. They seem very, very interesting. If this is your first kind of Reddit ghost story episode of mine, I don't read them beforehand so that I can have my authentic reaction, along with yours. So I don't know fully what these guys are about yet, but I cannot wait to find out. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into the first one. Okay. So the first post is called My First and Only Time Using a Ouija Board, and it is by Reddit user whatever7499. And this was 5 years ago. I feel like reading Reddit stories from a long time ago is very interesting because times change, and I feel like although 5 years ago it wasn't that different, I feel like it's really cool to hear a story that was from 5 years ago and be reflecting back on it now. It's just really cool. So it says, "Hello, I want to give you guys my backstory about the first time I played with the board. It was a long time ago, 5 to 6 years, and I was in a moment that I did not know what to do with my life. So me and a friend decided to leave our jobs and family and catch a plane to London and try to figure out what to do next." I mean, very ballsy of you. I hope this worked out. Oh, it literally says it seemed ballsy, but I had some friends living there, and I asked them if I could stay there with my friend a few days till I found a job and a room to stay. Oh, so you guys were moving there to get like jobs and stuff. They approved and all was fine. The house was really small and old, and we were 7, one guy, me, and 6 girls. Okay, I thought you were saying we were 7 years old at first, but no, just 7 total in the house. I got a job at a pub and found a room 1 week later from being there, but every night I would join my friends at night so we could do something. One night we decided to play the Ouija board. One of the girls had a high level of Reiki, and she said she had an open box, whatever that means, and that she had the board. Note that I never believed in this. My parents are really religious, and they always said that I should never play these games, but since I am not religious or believed in this Ouija thing, I wanted to try. So I think he means that he didn't believe in the Ouija thing. I came back from work that day and everything was ready to start playing. We had a lot of candles, the place was dark, and my Reiki friend did a bubble spell and said that it should protect us. In the beginning, the glass did nothing, and I was super confident that everything was bullshit, but then it started to move. We asked the name, and for what I remember, it was a little girl at first, and this time I was super sure that it was one of my friends. This little girl said she was killed in that house. She had a brother that was killed there as well. When we asked how, she did not reply, and the glass did not move again. Still, at this time, I was super confident that this was a joke, and I said to the girls that we should end the game because the glass did not move for a while. Then it moved again when my friend asked if anyone was there. My friend asked the name, and for my surprise, it was the name Augusto, the name of my grandparent that is dead. No one in that room knew this, since I was never close to him because I was a child. I did not say anything, and they asked a bunch of random questions to him, and he answered saying he was fine and he needed to leave. Then the glass started to spin randomly a lot, and we got scared. We did not end the game in the correct way. You don't do that. Always say bye. We just packed the stuff and didn't break the glass. This was for sure a mistake. I don't know. I think he's meaning the planchette by glass, but I'm not really sure because he says and didn't break the glass. So I don't know, but I think that's what he means. The next day at work, I only heard someone calling me by name without an English accent. perfect Portuguese accent. This creeped me out a bit, but I was sure it was just my mind. That night when I came home, my friend was telling the others that she listened to someone calling her all day. I was shocked. I told them what happened, and in that night, we listened to kids crying, but we were sure that the neighbors did not have kids. Next day, I woke up and one of the girls found a photo, black and white, of a woman carrying 2 kids. Since that day, I was super paranoid. The pictures I had in my house, when I looked, it seemed like a figure would leave the picture. Weird stuff would happen, like feeling that someone was following me in the street when I was sure I was alone. We decided to break the glass in full desperation. We said it was enough. When one of the girls got her arm scratched with 3 cuts. Wow, that's interesting. I want to know, like, did she wake up with them? How did that come about? And again, maybe by glass he means the board. I don't know. I wish he would have clarified, but I don't know what they mean. But I've always heard that burning a Ouija board, or in this case breaking it, I don't think is gonna to break the curse, because I've always heard it makes it worse when you burn it, so I would assume the same for breaking it as well. I decided to leave London 1 month later and everything was normal, except once when I was talking with my friends over TeamSpeak, it's like Skype, and I was telling him this story. They started to listen to some weird noises over my headset microphone. I was alone at home that night. They said it seemed like a rusty swing for children. I was super scared because I was home alone. I met a friend some months later and she said she was a witch, and I researched, and these people are really almost like a religion. I told my story to her and she asked me a few questions. I remember she asked me if I was always tired, and I remember that I am always tired, but that can be because of poor diet or something like that. I was gonna say, aren't we all always tired in today's world? But then she asked me if I was unlucky. Not unlucky in big things, but in really simple aspects, like dropping everything out of my hands or forgetting stuff really important, like my keys at home, or even if the strangest unlucky things happen. And when she said that, I identified with this so much. I never talked with her anymore, and my life is now pretty good. I still feel tired and unlucky, but overall, I never had more paranormal experiences, and I would never play with the Ouija board again. So that was a pretty simple one to start off with. Nothing too bad happened. Obviously, there was the girl that got the 3 cuts on her arm, which again is crazy, and I would really like to know more detail on that. But it seems to me just like, you know, a fairly simple case of maybe a little bit of a curse from an Ouija board. I always want to say an Ouija board instead of a Ouija board. But anywho, I feel like this was a pretty mild one to start off with. Pretty much just hearing some sounds and stuff, but hopefully we get a little bit more intense. I don't like to hear bad things happening to people, but I mean like in terms of more detail on conversations and stuff like that with these spirits. So let's move on to the next one, and I picked this one simply because of the title. It is called Buckle the Fuckle Upple Kids. So we are going to see what that is all about, and it is by Reddit user HeatherDawn24. We've used both a homemade spirit board and an actual Ouija board. The first time was my mother, my cousin Leanna, and my 2 aunts, Crystal and Amy. We were all sitting around the table. My father was sitting on the couch and they were doing a session. Granted, they did not know how to begin or end the session properly. I digress. Again, I feel like that's going to be a theme in these stories of people not opening or ending the sessions properly. It is a must if you do use a Ouija board, because again, that's how you disconnect the session from these spirits and entities still being attached to you. So definitely make sure to do that if you do decide to play with one, but I would just suggest avoiding it, and we'll see why today. Once they started talking to the board, it spelled out the word baby, fire, and sob. Now, during this time, my father worked at Tropicana, the juicer room, and he slipped and fell by the kiln they used to burn the rinds of the oranges. Had he been a few steps closer to the kiln, he would have fallen in. Those stories are so scary. Like, I see these videos on TikTok all the time where it's like the craziest ways people have died, and a lot of them are at workplaces, like little factories and warehouses and things, like falling into a boiling pot of chocolate. I saw that one time, or again getting sucked into these little like chopping machines or kilns or something like that. So I'm very glad that he did not get in that predicament, but it's still very sad that he obviously slipped and fell. Then a few weeks later, a family friend of ours, Rosie, her husband John, got deathly sick, and he was a very healthy guy. And he had a severe heart attack, to which he told Rosie felt like his whole body was on fire. like the board said. Oh my God. That is crazy. About 2 months later, my cousin Leanna had a miscarriage, which of whom would have been her second child at the time. It took her 3 years to get pregnant afterward because they found a cyst in her ovaries. Oh my gosh, this is heartbreaking. I mean, I wanted more intensity, but not this type. This is so sad. And after we decided to nope the fuck out of the house anyway because it was haunted as fuck, we found the blueprints to the house. And in the back of the house was a shed which had the initials SOB. We never even knew that or the blueprints existed. So SOB as in sob. I read it as sob before, but they did kind of spell it out when they said the board said it. So that's the same thing that the board said. That was just from one session. The next time they played, they did it in the garage shed in the back of the house, claiming that it'd be better for the spirits, which it wasn't. It spelled the word fall and broken. Not sure of the time span here because I'm still fucking terrified. My mom was walking with Amber, who was all of maybe 2 at the time, carrying her down the stairs and fell out of nowhere. Yeah, y'all have an evil entity that you are talking to. Like the dog had tripped her, but there wasn't a dog there. Luckily, mom caught Amber and saved her from any harm, but mom broke her foot. Again, broke, like the board said. Now we come to Riverview, and it's my turn to actually experience something from playing with the Ouija board. I was in the dining room with Sarah and Megan, and we were playing with a fake one we'd just randomly made up, and the name Gloria came up. About 3 or 4 days later, I started hearing shit in the house, and I see a woman who would stand over Amber's bed watching her sleep. One night in my dream, I asked her who she was, and she screamed her name so loudly I woke up. This is also when my sleep paralysis started up. Then we tried playing it over at my cousin's trailer and nothing really significant was said on the board. We were just fucking around. But about a day or so later, I got super sick and had to stay home for a week and miss school. That one you can ask Abbie. Okay, that was irrelevant. I never missed school. And of course, there were stupid little small dumb things that would happen, like shit would move around in the house, or I'd start hearing noises and seeing people that weren't really there. Or Zoe would get locked in the upstairs bathroom at the 2-story house or Riverview. We'd start hearing the piano being played at night, but in the morning the piano lid would be down, which is funny. Or again, Zoe or Neve would get locked in the laundry room with no explanation and whine because they were upset for no reason. So yes, I've had my fair share of experiences from using a Ouija board. If you ever want to use it, please at least educate yourself and do it properly. But more importantly, if you ever feel threatened by it or feel as if there's a darker force being drawn out of it, end the session. And not only throw the board away, but try to burn it as quickly as possible. See, I've heard that you should not burn Ouija boards, that it makes it worse. Oh, one more. After mom, dad, my 2 aunts, and my cousin played with it, about a month and a half later, we all went on vacation to Tallahassee. We come back and literally the only spot in the house that had any damage was a 3-foot hole where the plaster ceiling had fallen in, right where my head would have been. What the heck? Like in your bedroom or something? That is freaking crazy. So this kind of, I always, when I read these stories, I try to like picture who is writing them. And it feels almost like, not a kid, but, maybe somebody who's a little bit younger wrote this, because I feel like they were just shooting out random names and I'm like, who is Sarah? Who is Megan? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just think it's probably a younger kid, maybe like a 12-13 vibe. Sorry if that's wrong, but I was like, who are all these people? So it kind of just reminded me. And when they said like, and you can ask Zoe, I never miss school, I was like, okay girl, I believe you. So definitely a different perspective to hear from. It sounds like you guys actually were coming into contact with something that was not nice whatsoever. And I would recommend to stop playing with it. I know that maybe the girl that wrote this story might, but there were a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles and moms and all this, that, and the third playing with them as well. So I would probably just suggest to maybe not, because it doesn't seem like it's working out in your guys' favor. And again, some of these things are very serious, like the miscarriages, the getting really deathly sick, almost falling into a kiln. Like that's something you probably don't want to play with, I would just say. avoid that. And if something similar happens to you when you're using an Ouija board, just make sure that you're not testing it over and over and over again. Get the message that it sends you for sure the first time. Don't make it try to send the message to you over and over and over again. Okay, something weird I just noticed is that literally all the stories I picked out are from 5 years ago except one, which we're going to get to in a minute, but literally every other one is from 5 years ago. Is that weird? I feel like that's weird. I don't know, but I just thought I'd tell you guys about that because I'm sat here like, what does that mean? So the next story is by user 11catsby1, and it is called My Very Sad Ouija Board Experience. Most people, when they tell stories of Ouija boards, it's when something terrible happens, like a demon possesses a friend or a ghost starts to haunt someone's home. Yet my story is kind of different. I'll start off with saying that this happened when I was in the 9th grade. My friend had gotten a Ouija board for her birthday from her cousin, and my friends and I were dying to play. Don't say that too loosely, honey. We told our friend, who I'll name Caitlin for the sake of the story, to wait until we all got together to play the board. Our parents drive us over to her house on a Friday after school so we could hang out and spend the night. None of us had told them about what we were planning to do, since all of us came from strictly religious backgrounds. We ate dinner and swam in her pool, then got out the rules for the board and set everything up. The door had been shut, the ceiling fan was turned on, full speed to drown out our questions, and we were all excited about what we were about to try. There were 4 of us there, including me, Caitlin, all of these are fake names, Jackie, and Beth. We sat in a tight circle around the board, and we nervously sat our hands on the planchette. Beth greeted the spirit who owned the board once we touched it, and we all started giggling. None of us really believed in spirits, so we weren't too worried about the planchette moving or something in the room breaking. The first question we asked was by Jackie, who asked if there was anyone there. The planchette didn't move, and again my friends and I all started laughing, not taking our hands off the planchette. Caitlin then asked a question. What is your name? Suddenly the planchette started sliding across the board. We were all freaked out, and Jackie even screamed. I mean, I would be too. I'd be screaming. Caitlin started asking who was moving the piece. When none of us fessed up, she got kind of angry and started watching the planchette with disgust on her face. MARTHABANKS. Suddenly, we turned to see Caitlin gasp, and a horrified look was painted on her face. Beth laughed and asked how we came up with a name that quick, following the question, "How old were you?" 6'1". Jackie and I noticed that Caitlin had started to cry, very silently, but she was close to sobbing, big tears falling down her face. "How are you today?" she asked through tears. Beth had now noticed Caitlin's sadness too. I asked her what was going on and why she was so sad, but she didn't answer. GOOD. Caitlin laughed a bit, then asked if heaven was nice. Oh, this is gonna make me cry. All 4 of us stared intently at the board, unmoving our hands from the piece. The planchette slowly spelled out ITSBEAUTIFUL. It's beautiful. I feel like I should just start saying what it says. Caitlin quickly said goodbye without any of our consent before removing her hands from the piece, pulling ours away with her. The rest of the night she didn't speak of the incident, no matter how many times we asked. Years later, when I was in 12th grade, I had called her up after not speaking to her in a while. I was still friends with Beth, and I had gotten way out of touch with Jackie. I still spoke to Caitlin, but not as often as I used to. She had moved away and she wasn't available to call much, so I finally got her attention one day and brought up the night we were playing with her Ouija board, and asked if she still had the board. She told me that she asked her mom to sell it since it was taking up space in her storage closet. Yet Caitlin sent another text that got me very curious. Oh wait, was that the day I got super upset? I texted back to confirm her question and asked her why she was so sad. I now know that Martha Banks was her grandmother, who had a stroke when she was 53, another when she was 57, and the last one when she was 61, which killed her in a couple of days. Oh, that's so sad. I know this is a very touchy subject, but Caitlin had said that she was almost certain that it was her grandmother. One of the reasons being that a couple of days after all of us had come over, she walked out to the kitchen to get a snack and saw that a picture had fallen down in the living room. When she went to go pick it up, she noticed that all of the pictures were originally in the room were still there, and that the picture didn't have a frame. She told me that as soon as she picked the picture up, tears poured from her eyes. The picture was of her and her grandmother when she was a baby. She had never seen it before. This memory always makes me go to the side of Ouija boards when someone says that you shouldn't play. Of course there are dangers, but taking a risk can allow you to learn a lot of things, and this memory for Caitlin, I think, will allow her to remember that her grandma is safe and happy for all of her days. Which, again, there's a good side of being able to communicate with spirits, but I just think the reason why I don't like Ouija boards so much is because you cannot control what spirit comes through the board, and there's something different with just simply trying to communicate through through radio signals. Obviously, that's not your body, and when they're manipulating radio wave signals, that's not you, versus with a Ouija board, they're manipulating your actual body to move the planchette. And again, I guess you could argue that they're like manipulating the actual material, like the planchette, but I wouldn't take the risk. And again, there's so many horror stories with these boards, and I just think that they much outweigh the good experiences. And again, obviously, I'm so glad that Caitlin got to have that experience with her grandma, but again, it didn't have to be her grandma that came through. It could have been anything. So I just think that there are better ways to try to communicate with ghosts, and maybe they're not as convenient as Ouija boards, but again, I've even had certain times in my life where I've used like the Ghost Radar app to try to communicate with my dad, and although I don't think it's the most reliable thing because those apps are very easily manipulated, it did say some very relevant things, and that in and of itself gave me peace of mind at that time. So I just think that there's better ways that I think would be able to do the same thing for her if something was said that resonated with her. But again, I just think it's not really worth the dangers that can happen. But to each their own. I mean, as long as you are aware of what can happen and you still decide to proceed with caution, then that's fine. I mean, we all get our choices in the world. So yeah, that was definitely a sad one, but a cute one, I would say. So the next story we have is by user John G108, and it is called The Martial Arts versus the Ouija Board, which definitely stuck out to me because I gotta know what this is about. The story below is true. It actually happened to me and my martial arts instructor at the time. I did not exaggerate and took very little literary license with any of the story below. That was hard to say. Very little literary license. Too many L's there, my dude. If I made any actual mistakes, it would be just a failure of memory with some specific details of locations and characters at the time. This is a Victorian-style house in a small city of about 100,000 people in southeastern Massachusetts, dating back to the 1800s, not far from where Lizzie Borden did her thing. The house still sits there to this day, complete with the iconic Widow's Peak of the day. The house overlooks a small cliff and the river that defines the city itself. Anybody that drives over the bridge that spans said river, and if going east looks to their left and right if going west, will also see this house. The year is 1977. The 4-story house at the time was being used for both business and some residential purposes. The basement and first floor were being used for a martial arts school and health club. The second and third floor held the living quarters and offices for the owner and one tenant at the very top of the house. The tenant at the time, while being a successful political type, also taught himself to be a writer of history of some note. His main interest was the infamous Count Dracula, interesting, and other such personalities. The other main character besides myself was the above-mentioned owner of this business and house. One night, as various financial and personal issues were causing much concern for the owner and myself, while both believing in Christ but not practicing the faith, we came upon a Ouija board in a closet seldom used or opened. They decided for kicks just to see what the Ouija board would say about some of the upcoming decisions, business and personal, they were going to have to make later on that month. Just as they started to ask the board their first question, the tenant happened to walk into the room and said, "Do you guys realize the Ouija board is considered satanic, and by asking it questions you risk letting an evil spirit into the house?" He promptly left the house after telling us this bit of information to what we thought was nonsense. However, just to be on the safe side, we decided to destroy the board and throw it away immediately. Am I wrong in thinking that that is like the worst thing you can do after using a Ouija board? is to destroy it or throw it away? Because I have heard that multiple times, and I know I'm not thinking of that backwards. I mean, it makes sense as to why you would think that that's a good idea, but I have heard like strongly the opposite about these things. While we were both able to tear the board up itself, when we tried to destroy the Ouija device by stamping it with our feet, it would not break. This started to concern us because we both held at multiple ranks of a black belt and we knew how to kick. After a few more unsuccessful attempts, we decided to take the board and device and throw it off the cliff behind the house. As we go to throw this so-called harmless game over the cliff, we look down and there sits a very large black cat looking up at us with a menacing stare on its face. God as my witness, by this time in my life, I had spent many hours at this location and never seen this cat before around the property. We decided to throw the pieces of the game at the cat to scare it away, to no avail. The cat simply kept staring at us. I then found a rock and, not wanting to hurt the cat, just threw it close to it again. It still did not move. Finally, in a very leisurely and kind of contemptuous manner, the cat turned its back on us and walked away. During the next 2 years that I frequented that house and property, neither I nor the owner ever saw that cat again. While we never did ask the Ouija board any actual questions, to this day I am not certain if any of our actions brought us bad luck. However, within a few years, the business at that location did cease to exist. I mean, it's possible. I think that I think you would have to open the portal, the session, to actually have anything come through. So maybe it was like a lingering spirit that got like set off by the fact that you had a Ouija board around. I'm not really sure, but because you guys never opened the session, it seems to me like nothing could have come through. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes just like, again, manifestation is a thing. So the guy walking into the room saying that it's considered satanic and you might be letting an evil spirit into the house, maybe something around that was kind of evil heard that and then started taking its course. But honestly, I'm not really sure. That is definitely up to speculation why you guys experienced the cat and the bad luck. I would like to know why the business ceased to exist. Like, did the owner just decide to not have the business, or did the business begin to fail? Because that would be two different things. Obviously, if the owner just decided to not have the business anymore, that's not anything to do with paranormal. But because he said it ceased to exist, that tells me that maybe it wasn't the owner's choice, but I'm not sure. But definitely interesting that it took that much to break the planchette as well. That speaks volumes, I feel like. Alrighty, so the next one is by user s.mixer, and this one is the one that's from 3 years ago rather than 5 years ago. Every other one is from 5 years ago, which is kind of freaking me out because we're talking about Ouija boards and I'm like, what does this mean? Is the Ouija board world trying to tell me something? Like, are 5 significant in Ouija boards? I'm not sure. But this next one is called Kurt, which among my skim time, just to make sure that it's a good and juicy story, it's talking about Kurt Cobain. So that's definitely very intriguing. So let's see what this guy has to say about Mr. Kurt Cobain. I have so many stories, I'm not sure where to begin. Let's go with Kurt Cobain. I was 15 when I began experimenting with the Ouija board. I didn't really know anything about the dark side of it, as my grandmother played it with me when I was very young. The board my Gma chose to play with me was supposedly my great-grandmother's, her mother's. I was told later my great-grandmother was very intrigued by the supernatural. I love that when older people are also into the paranormal. I just love it extra because it's becoming more normalized to talk about, but back when your great-grandma was probably growing up, I'm assuming that it wasn't. Like, I feel like it's very much so like an unspoken topic back in those days. So it's cool to hear about people who, regardless of it not being talked about, still had like a draw to it. I love it. Anyway, the board had significance to me due to this, and I held it in the highest regard, as it was my only relic from my ancestry. It began innocent enough and always played with a friend. We'd joke and play, asking all the mundane questions. After about 20 questions answered correctly with no way of the other person playing, I was hooked. I had a magnetic connection to the board, to be honest. Never felt a connection like that since, actually. Soon, I found myself drawn to playing it constantly. Ooh, that sounds very, very dangerous. Once out of school, I wanted to play it. I realized none of my friends were as interested as I was in the thing. So yes, despite the warnings, I played by myself. No! This would be the beginning of my curse, I do believe. Yeah, I'm not shocked by that. I would play hooky so I could play an entire school day. Oh, so you were like addicted. Damn, okay, that's interesting. I've never heard that before, so let's see what ends up happening with an Ouija board addiction, I guess. I couldn't put the planchette down. I spoke to Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, several past classmates, and the most prominent, Kurt Cobain. I mean, it's not unbelievable to think that you might have been talking to celebrities, but I feel like more than anything, because you had experiences with 3 different very iconic people, perhaps it was like a demon fucking with you. You know what I mean? Because it is slightly unbelievable that you talked to 3 different very iconic musicians. So my theory going right now is that perhaps that's a demon pulling your leg. He died while my obsession was spawning, so naturally being a fan, I couldn't wait to reach him. So you were planning on reaching him, which is another reason I'm thinking that this was just manipulated by a not so good spirit, or maybe a good spirit. I mean, good spirits sometimes are like malicious or mischievous or whatever. But we'll see how this pans out, if there's actually anything like dangerous about the spirit. I remember trying a few times before it felt authentic, but eventually it was, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. He told me to get the word out about his murder. Oh, his case. I'm on the side that he did not commit suicide. Just saying. I know this is not about true crime, but yeah. That's my opinion on that. He told me to somehow get his wife investigated. He was pleading. I would get lost in a trance-like state and realize 4 or 5 hours would go by without me ever stopping. Wow, this is so insane. I've never heard about anybody with a Ouija board addiction. He told me some pretty amazing stuff that I can't really remember today, but know they were profound enough for me to tell everyone, and I do mean everyone. He told me Courtney killed him and staged his death. I'd go on about what a okay, we're not doing that. He says skank, but in regards to Courtney, we don't do that around here. We don't slut shame. But if she did kill him, she did need to be arrested, as this person goes on to say. I still to this day do not understand how she got away from it all. It really doesn't make sense. This actually forced me to realize a few things quite early in life. I had a couple people that said they believed me, but no one did. My parents didn't, and it really drove me nuts. I started doing some crazy teenage angst things and morbidly wore a picture of him safety pinned to my clothes daily. Oh gosh, okay. I'm trying not to be like judgy whatsoever, but this kind of does seem like a situation where something was pulling you in to like make you addicted to it. And though it's like through the picture of Kurt Cobain, I feel like this was a demon taking you over and making you like its little servant. That's just the vibe I'm getting. Living in my hometown where I went to school, I never knew my actions as a 15-year-old would still be brought up today, but whatever. Point is, things were happening. In the rare event I did want to sleep, I couldn't. I must have went a month without sleeping after his death. Dude, I'm telling you, this was not Kurt Cobain. This was a demon. This was a demon. I saw things I still cannot explain. It wasn't him that was doing these odd things, though, I could tell. It was something far more sinister. The whole thing was something far more sinister. I hate to be the one to break it to you, a whopping 3 years later, but that was not Kurt. I'm sorry. Things would fly off the walls, candles would go out, and brand new CDs would skip. I sound so old writing this. I would hear things, see figures standing over me when I would try to sleep. It was pretty traumatic, to say the least. Now, Kurt would always have a sunny disposition. The other spirits I spoke to didn't. I think I opened up a whole dimension of demonic beings once I began playing. Yeah, I would agree with that. My obsession lasted about 1.5 years, all the while the board being my main focus. I remember speaking to Kurt one night before my parents got home about something new in the media about his case. Not sure what it was, but it was prevalent. I was downstairs and saw the same picture of Kurt I always safety pinned on a TV scrolling up. My mom and dad saw it. My dad still doesn't talk about it, but my mother still gets freaked out every time she hears his name. Here's the kicker. The TV was not on and was unplugged. Wow. That is crazy. I just calmly walked by it and my mom stopped me, screamed my name, and asked if I saw it. I replied yes and think it was just so common at this point. I didn't give it a second glance until she startled me by pointing it out. I have several more chilling stories, but this is instilled in my mind. Kurt never rested about getting his story to be heard and told me unless she left some evidence behind, everyone was just going to close him away once dead and gone. I reminded and reassured him this would never happen. I would always seek the truth and continue to make waves and let the proper authorities know so Courtney could face justice. I'm happy to say that over 20 years later, there is evidence of Courtney's intent. I am not entirely sure of the investigation status currently, but know some details recently have been brought to light. Bye for now. So that is obviously, there's so many layers to that story, and it wasn't even that long of a story, but I just feel like there's so many things that can be broken down. So first of all, I am still on board with the fact that I do not think this was actually Kurt Cobain. I think that this was a demon or evil entity. And I guess it doesn't really have to be evil. It could just be a normal ghost that was like a prankster of some sort. Because again, nobody was hurt. No action that this ghost took was anything except like just a little bit unsettling. Like again, a figure standing over you while you're sleeping. Obviously the no sleep thing is pretty brutal. So maybe this was a bad ghost. I think pretty much that should be said is that it is a bad ghost, but was it actually evil or was it actually just a bad normal ghost, if that makes sense? Just like every human isn't evil, you can be a bad person without being actually evil. So my theory in this case is that it was some sort of entity, probably more on the evil side, I would guess, trying to get you to dedicate your life to it through the image of Kurt Cobain. This thing could have known that you liked Kurt Cobain, and you said that you would try to reach Kurt Cobain multiple times after his death. So again, there could be something that saw your consistency with trying to reach a specific person that you obviously idolize or like or whatever you want to call it, and they decided to pull your leg. Obviously this person says that nobody will ever convince him that it wasn't Kurt Cobain, so that's all that's to be said on that. You know what happened to you and you know your truth, but my guess is, again, it's probably something that was trying to just unfortunately trick you. And obviously I'd be curious to know. I know that was like the big talk of the time that Kurt died, was that Courtney was the one who did it. He didn't really commit suicide, blah, blah, blah. But I'd be curious to know if you just heard, like truthfully, if you just heard about these theories from the board or if it was already out in the media, which I'm assuming it was already out because I think it happened pretty instantly. But yeah, this one's definitely a strange one for me because I have not ever heard of anybody having a Ouija board obsession like that. So obviously I'm glad that person kind of broke out of it and hopefully is past that stage of their life. We have one more story that we're going to try to push through fairly quickly here, and it is by user Skirt Snake. And again, 5 years ago, right back to that 5 years ago, and it is called An Experience from an Old Friend, in quotation marks. So let's hear about this friend then. About 3 years ago, I was hanging out with two friends of mine. One was a boy, Jake, and one was a girl, B. We were all about 12 to 13 at the time. Me and B had always been fascinated about Ouija boards and wanted to try it. Being 12-year-old kids, we obviously didn't have a job at the moment, so we begged Jake to buy a Ouija board with the money his mom gave him so we could all try it. We all hurried over to a drugstore and searched for a Ouija board. With luck, we found one, and luck is in quotations. Once we bought it, we walked it to our local baseball fields where we invited a couple more friends to play with us. While playing with the board, we came across the spirit that a friend of mine, Chelsea, had encountered previous times before this. The spirit goes by the name of Greg. Coincidentally, Chelsea had just moved into a house that I had previously lived in. This house was big, and my brother and sister, including me, were always creeped out about it. We talk about it till this day. My brother would sleepwalk. He had never done this before. My sister and I, who shared a room back then, would never be able to sleep in our room without my mom being with us, and even on certain occasions, the bathroom by our room had the glass shower door shattered in the middle of the night. Oh my gosh, that is scary. Another day, the door to our backyard, which was also made out of glass, had shattered out of nowhere. Damn, 2 doors. Yeah, that is definitely significant. That is not a coincidence. So basically, this house was whack. I mean, that's one way of putting it, and was filled with an angry spirit with the desire to scare us. Well, back to Chelsea, she had explained this ghost to me that instantly gave me the chills because I had seen him before as well in the same house. He was bald with a tattoo on his head, a plain white t-shirt with dark blue jeans. He had came to me and my brother one night. I wasn't able to sleep, so I went into my brother's room where we both woke up to the man sitting in a wooden chair, Greg, just staring at us sleeping. We both thought it was a dream till we woke up the next morning to tell each other the same thing. Now to the Ouija board. While contacting Greg, we didn't think much of it, but after this harmless fun game, me and my friends' lives changed just a little that day. We had all began to see things or hear things that just weren't normal. One of my guy friends that joined us told us that one night when he went in his kitchen to get a glass of water, a glass on the counter behind him fell down and shattered right next to his foot. So there's a pattern of glass shattering here, which is of note. But one of the weirdest things that had happened during this period in time with the Ouija board was the night that me, Bea, and Chelsea had discussed burning the board and getting rid of it. Okay, this has come up in almost every single story. Maybe we should do an episode on like Ouija board lures or something like that. I'm gonna keep that in mind because I want to get down to like the bottom of that one. That night we all spent the night at Bea's house and we were in the living room sleeping on the couch. Chelsea and Bea were on one side of the couch while I was on the other end by myself. We were all trying to fall asleep, so when my heart started to race and I was having a hard time breathing. This had never happened before, so I was scared. None of us were asleep yet, so I asked them if we could go back into Bea's room to sleep because I felt spooked and something didn't feel right. Just then, a chair from her dining room moved back an inch and sent us running into her room. Not to mention, we were the only ones there because Bea's mom was out with friends. After we had calmed down while watching YouTube videos on my iPad, I told Chelsea, who was wide awake, that she could use my iPad while I went to bed. I soon fell asleep quickly. Though I don't remember any of what happens next, something has led me to believe that I had been possessed that night. Okay, that's a little bit scary. My friend Chelsea told me I had taken my shirt off and got up to walk over to the other side of the bed where I stared at Bea, and when she asked me what I was doing, I just grinned at her. No. And then walked back over and fell asleep. That makes me a little bit nauseous, I'm not gonna lie. When she told me the next morning, my heart dropped because I couldn't even recall waking up last night. So the next day we burned the Ouija board and everything was dormant for years until now. I was at my boyfriend's house and I had forgotten pretty much about the whole thing. I hadn't played a Ouija board since. My boyfriend was at practice, so I was hanging out with his sister, who I had become really good friends with, when all of a sudden she pointed out a Ouija board in her room and she brought it out to the living room to play with her younger sister and her other friend. Not really interested, I just sat and watched. Smart gal. What happened next horrified me. Not to mention none of them knew anything about my previous haunting, and not to mention they knew nothing of Greg. They were all playing and they were patiently waiting for a response. They asked, "Is there anyone here who wants to play?" The planchette slowly moved over to yes. From here they just asked basic questions such as how did you die, what year were you born, etc. Until they asked the spirit how old they were. The spirit replied with 56. This caught my attention because I had remembered asking the same questions a few years back to the board, where it replied with the same. Then they asked the name and the board responded Greg, and I sat up quickly where tears started to form in my eyes, and they all looked at me asking if I was okay, where I started to summarize everything, and then her younger sister went on to ask, "Do you know anyone in this room?" Sorry, there's a bus going by. The board spelled my name out letter by letter till I yelled at them to say goodbye, so that's where I'm at. Okay, so the last bit of that is definitely very scary, especially because, again, this was years after the initial incident. So yeah, Greg is definitely not somebody you want on your team. And obviously, a possession is never fun. I'm just glad that it wasn't a long-term possession because, again, I feel like most possessions, they stick with you for a while. So if that truly is what was happening and it wasn't just a case of like sleepwalking type of situation, I'm glad that it came and went. And yeah, I mean, obviously it's definitely very unsettling for these events to take place, but I'm glad that you didn't end up getting hurt. And I hope that since this post, it obviously didn't keep on, Greg did not continue bothering you. But yeah, definitely very unsettling. And again, that grin, I feel like in my last episode of the Ghostly Hitchhikers, there was one of the hitchhikers that would like start laughing really, really loud to try to piss off the person that was driving them somewhere. And that shit just creeps me out so much. The eerie laughing, the eerie grinning, there's just something so like next level menacing about it that I do not vibe with. But anywho, that was all of our Ouija board experiences that we have today. Hopefully this taught you to not play with a Ouija board. But if you do decide, I mean, you can always let me know what happens. And if you have played with one in the past and you want to share that experience with me, I would be happy to hear it. There's a couple ways you can do this. So the first way is to email me. And it is it's allthingsghostlybusiness@gmail.com. And just make sure to put in the subject line like ghost tale or ghost story, something like that, so that I know. But the second option is I do actually have a Reddit community page, and it's just All Things Ghostly. So if you go to that community page, you can publicly post your experience there as well. And I would love to film an episode of all of your guys' stories. So when I get enough stories, I will definitely do that. So I would appreciate your contribution if you so choose to help me with that. So some other socials you guys can follow is my TikTok mainly, which is @allthingsghostly. I always post on there a couple of times a week with a little sneak peek of what the episode is going to be about, and then also little clips here and there. I was doing some get ready with me's, but I do those a little bit less now just because I gotta slap this face on and get going places. But I can do more of those if you guys like them as well, and I would love to eventually start doing some more things on there. But we're definitely in the beginning phases of, figuring out what I'm going to do with the All Things Ghostly TikTok. If we even have TikTok here soon, if that gets banned, my life will be over. Not literally, but it would be very sad if it were banned. Anywho, I do have a Instagram for the podcast, and that is just All Things Ghostly as well. I haven't really posted on there since the beginning of the podcast, so that's definitely not the best place to follow me on. But if I get enough people that are interested in having me on Instagram, then obviously I will start posting some stuff about the podcast there too. So anywho, enough self-promo. I will go ahead and give you guys another little sneak peek because I feel like that just builds the intensity. I like it. So my next episode is actually going to be haunted stadiums, so kind of like sports stadiums and venues and stuff like that, which is very interesting to me because I feel like the sports world is all like jockey and toxically masculine. So I'm really, really excited to hear some stories about, haunts with guys who I feel like would be too afraid to admit their like fear because they're like, oh, I'm a football player. That's not a ghost, So that one's definitely going to be an interesting. So make sure you come back for that episode, and that will be up next week. If you guys didn't know, I post every Wednesday. So that is the day that I have chosen. I don't really know why. It's just the middle of the week. It feels good. So yeah, without babbling on too much, I'm going to go ahead and just say that I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know your favorite story from today. I think my favorite was probably... Oh, I don't know. That's interesting. I like the Kurt one because I feel like it was a manipulation from an evil spirit, but I also like the Greg one because it's very intense. And then you have the touching one with, what was her name? Kaylee or something like that? Caitlin and her grandma. That was super cute. Anywho, let me know your favorite though. I want to hear it. And yeah, anywho. I keep saying anywho, I'm babbling like I always do. I suck at ending these things because I never want to stop talking to you guys. Okay, for real this time. I will see you guys in my next episode. Goodbye. Have a good night. Have a good morning. Have a good day. And I will see you guys next time.